Es geht also um die Frage, welche Trends, welche Herausforderungen, mit welchen Trends, mit welchen Herausforderungen werden die kleinen und mittleren Unternehmer bzw. auch die Familienbetriebe konkret konfrontiert werden in der nächsten Zeit und das noch dazu in Zeiten einer fortschreitenden Globalisierung und vor allem auch einer rasant fortschreitenden Digitalisierung. Antworten darauf kommen von einer sehr renommierten Zukunftsforscherin. Sie ist eine Dänin in London, wenn ich das richtig sage.
Guten Abend. Ich wollte sehr gerne diesen Vortrag in Deutsch halten, aber das ist mir ein bisschen so schwierig, weil ich 25 Jahre lange nicht mehr in Deutschland gelebt habe. Ich konnte das Vortrag auch nicht in Dänisch halten, so ich werde jetzt besser das in Englisch halten und ich habe auch gehört, ich habe genau 24,5 Minuten. So, jetzt fange ich an. Okay, it has been said that we actually march backwards into the future. And what that means is that we can only look to the past and the present to understand the trends that are shaping the future. Now, in this context, all of us, whether we are governments, whether we are businesses, organizations, or individuals, we all actively shape the future through our choices and through our actions. So, if we, ladies and gentlemen, if any of us ignore the trends, the writing on the wall, today those trends are opportunities, but tomorrow they might represent threats. Now, I'm often asked, so what's the big trend? You know, what's the big thing to watch out for? Well, our biggest challenges today, in case you haven't noticed, is actually that of navigating complexity. It's interesting that already back in 2010, IBM did a global survey, a research, a report, where they interviewed 1,500 CEOs. And those CEOs, all of them, it was face-to-face interviews, all agreed on 3 things. Number 1, complexity is increasing. Number 2, most organizations are not equipped to deal with this complexity. And number 3, the most important leadership quality is actually going to be creativity. We've heard a bit about it. It's very, very interesting to see that so much talk about innovation. But why do we still continue to make more of the same? One thing is for sure, we cannot solve the 21st century challenges with yesterday's toolbox. We need a new toolkit. I came across a very, very interesting article in Harvard Business Review, and it spelled out the capital P in leadership is purpose. So when Harvard says it, then people start to listen. But what does it mean? It's clearly time, and we've heard this as well in all the previous talks now, this evening, that we need to rethink the future. It is time for organizations to ask themselves very, very important questions. Why are we in business? Why will people work for us, buy our products or services? Or even more importantly, why would anyone invest in my company? Purpose means you have to ask yourself, why do I get up in the morning and go to work? Is it to only accumulate 1 P, which is profit, or do I also want purpose, be a little bit, I'm considered about the planet, and also incalculate people in this whole bigger picture? And this is really a big question. Now, a global survey, and this is a very shocking survey, asked 100,000 people in 30 countries the same question. Would you recommend your organization to a friend? And guess what? Somebody's laughing. Did you read that? 48% of people will not recommend the business they're working for. That's pretty serious. This is about reputation. We need new business model. We need to rethink really how we can match the expectation that tomorrow's people will have. 2012, I was asked, I felt a bit, to come and speak about what everybody speaks about, more of the same. This was at the Economists, it's a very big annual conference called the Big Rethink. And this is where I presented this new business model, the 4P business model. And why is that? Simply because when we look back to the past, the 20th century, everything that we really valued was everything that could be measured. It was pure left-brain thinking, and it was only banking on 1P, that of profit. But naturally, when we look into the future, we need a much wider definition of success. Hence, I propose this 4P outlook, because once we have a positive impact on people, planet, with a purposeful ethos to match, the meaningful dimension of our business, this is when we enrich our environment, we feed into it, and that, of course, will lead to a much better performance. Now, this is also how I scan trends. I do investigate all of the layers in society. I call this in my book the Trend Management Toolkit. I speak about the importance to look at the bigger picture, to take time out to think and prepare for the future. And trend mapping is a strategic method for tapping into the macro trends that we see, mega trends, whatever you name them, the society driver, the biggest driver. Now, in the past, we had a tendency to look at what I call pestle analysis. How many of you are familiar with the pestle analysis? See some hands. Get a hand out. 2 people. Okay, pestle, ladies and gentlemen, is politics, economics, society, technology, environment, and legislations. That's all the pragmatic left-brain values. That's everything you can measure. But we have to tap into the sort of cultural softer. We have to understand a little bit more about what people are feeling. And by systematically scanning the socio-economic drivers in the left brain, social and scientific dimension, and pairing them with the emotional and spiritual dimension, we get a much better understanding of what's going on in today's world. But what we can also see when we look at the trends that is there, and this is really just a visual representation of all the facts and figures and all the numbers, what we can see is that tomorrow's business model have to be underpinned by 4 Ps. The trends I'm going to be talking about this evening are basically also the trends that I have collected for each of the dimensions I'm speaking about. I like you to think about those as future sound bites. You cannot take out one trend and say, I will be working on this for the next 2 years, this is my strategy, because that's not how it works. All of those trends, and we heard about this, actually everything is interconnected. Now, when I look at the first trends, I'm going to be doing a little bit of a marathon here. Oh, let me just also say that what is also curious to see that my profit trends very much speak about digitalization, which is one of the biggest challenges for small, medium enterprises. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a small, medium enterprise. The only thing that is good in small businesses is that they're agile. That means, okay, sometimes you have more people, sometimes you have less people. But my God, it is a tall order. Sometimes as the boss, you multitask and more than that, and you have to be good at so many things, and it's sometimes a big challenge. But trust me, we cannot ignore that of digitalization. We cannot ignore people. We cannot ignore that it's about planet, it is about purpose. Because if we don't have meaning, we don't have the passion, because that's maybe the 5th P, passion, we cannot create something that is good enough to be value driven or valuable in the future. So the first trend, radical openness, and you will say, this is not a new trend, 2030. But it is a thing that most people forget, that it is a very important one, that we constantly need to cultivate our reputation, because reputation is our most valuable currency. When you ask people globally, 4 out of 5 people will tell you that the most important thing in a CEO, when I speak to a CEO, when I do business, is that he or she communicate clearly and transparently, because that's when I trust him or her. When we look at bigger companies globally, and I think it's a fantastic case, General Electric, a very diverse company with lots of different units, how do they get the feeling of being a we organization? Because again, 20th century thinking was very much about me, me, me. They use social media to get people within the organization to talk, understand what they're actually doing, but it's also a fantastic tool to bridge a more open relationship with their customers. What is also important about radical openness, total transparency, is actually that companies are well placed to make a positive difference to people's life when they are transparent. And this is also how you attract talent. Digital transformation, and let me remind you, we are not talking about going on to a journey where we're not speaking about a defined end destination, that's where we go and that's then where we stay. No, this is a journey and it's a process, and we constantly have to be adaptable. We constantly have to look at how we can use this transformation as a platform, as an enabler for building more trust, attracting the right talent, but more important, this is also the key to high performance. It's very interesting to look at a family-owned company, IKEA. The catalog is printed in more copies than the Bible. They were late adapters. Any of you remember that you couldn't buy IKEA online? I did, because I live in London. If you go to the biggest store, you will spend about 3 hours getting there because it's only around the corner, so it's easy to get a delivery. But when they did it very well, and now you can do digital home makeovers. You get your little smartphone, you download the app, and you can then see how the furniture you like to buy, they look in your home. But it's a two-way dialogue, because IKEA now have 15% less return because most people, overestimate the size of their home. That's a very helpful one. Tesco have done another one. This is actually, it was trialed out in Seoul. And this is basically a 0 square meter shop. It's a poster. In crowded society, you don't have time to go to the shop, especially also in Asia, you work up to 10 o'clock in the evening. So with your little app, you just do the shopping, you tell the app you want it to deliver it in an hour when you are arriving at home. But this is just two very, I would say, pragmatic examples about what is happening out there. We're speaking about multi-channel. So multi-channel means that we have to move from device and channel-centered into a much bigger sphere where we think about user-centered. Most people, you probably can all relate to this, you have a mobile phone, you have a laptop, and you have a tablet, etc., etc. What it means is that companies in the future will have to adapt their messages to multiple devices and channels, because that's the only way you will get a hold of the end user. And for that sake, also the people who works for you. Now, this is all very important information because we live in the smart society. We live in the smart era. Not all gets it right, but this is a case study from New York. In fact, the mayor of New York spent $1 million to simply try to clamp down on businesses that were dropping the restaurants' cooking oils into the drain. 6 weeks, they nailed them all. They saved within 6 months a few $1 million. So it was a very, very good investment. But it talks to us about collaborating, working together, and using data, big data for that. Because let us just remind ourselves that, in fact, The internet of everything, as I call it, the internet of things, is also like a big global brain. More and more places, people, and devices will be connected. In fact, it's predicted that by 2020, as many as 50 billion devices will be connected to the Internet of Things. That's Ericsson. So Cisco says it's 75 billion, but whatever way you look at it, is a hell of a lot of, many things, many devices that will be connected. Now, that is very important because cities, some of them already are. We have smart cities like in Stockholm, Stockport, also Copenhagen is one of them. Cities are living organisms, and they will act as intelligent and automated distribution system. They will connect transportation, buildings, goods, services, people, government, everything. And it's very important to understand that small businesses, for example, in England, this is an app called City Mapper. So if any of you go to any big cities, get the City Mapper because it gets you from A to B. It also gives small businesses access to data. And this app is interesting because it's using what we call big data from the city, telling you in real time how you get from A to Z. If you take the car, if you take the bus, even if you walk, how many calories will I burn? Eventually, it will also tell you your carbon footprint. I think it's interesting, and really this is big. So in case you've ignored anything about technology, this is your sort of short introduction to where to get started. Now, we know that those guys, the global citizen, the millenniums, they are already born, digital natives. So, of course, for them, they will not accept if anything is old-fashioned. They want the real thing. In fact, I think it's important to note that by 2020, workforce 3.0, 50% of those will be millenniums, and majority of those will expect to work outside of their native country. The map clearly illustrates that we are migrating more than ever. We leave our country, we study somewhere else, and we might go to a third place to work. But it's all about that this generation see the world without boundaries. They're not as local. They think global, and then maybe if you do a good job about your reputation, they might come back and work with you. What most people don't understand, not very many people ask, the millenniums what they really, really want. Deloitte did a very interesting article or a report, and they actually found out that talent simply look for one thing, and that's purpose. So again here, all of you, it's important to notice that they do not want silo culture. They simply expect purpose-driven leadership models. They want that to be the new norm. And another thing as well, multicultural is key to economic clusters. I mean, just look to Silicon Valley. 2 out of 3 people there were born outside of the country. London is a huge cluster as well for startup. We saw the list there, also the Nordics. And I want to say there's a very interesting case study in Finland. It's called the Sauna Club. In fact, Aalto University put together 5 different universities. So basically 5 different universities, so it became Aalto University. And they have the Sauna Club, which is basically a startup place. You don't go to the sauna, but it's just called like that, where you help young people to become more entrepreneurial. I call this trend a beta-preneurship. I feel myself, I'm a beta-preneur. I had a vision, I had an idea. I didn't get it in alpha mode, because if I had waited for that perfect thing, I probably wouldn't have got started in the first place. If you ask most people, why are they scared of becoming entrepreneurs? If you go to any MBA class and you ask them, what do you want after your MBA? Do you know what the standard answer is? I want to become a CEO. Fine, but why don't you become a CEO of your own company? Simply, and this is also what we hear, the fear of failure. And I was shocked to see that the number is almost 5 times more costly to do your own company in the Europe vision than it is in, for example, America. That is very much a shocking number. Now, It's refreshing, but it's about time, I should say, that the EU now promotes entrepreneurship as a career to give recognition to SMEs' contribution to Europe's economy. But again, also there's a huge opportunity for women. Only 30% of entrepreneurs in Europe are women. So what's that space? You will see more of them coming. If you're a bigger company and you want to attract the talent, you need to employ entrepreneurs in-house, and they're called intrapreneurs. In 1948, looking well back in the past, somebody did something amazing. 3M, they gave all of their employees, or at least top sort of management, license to think, time to think and innovate. And that's happened already now the last, 60 years. The Post-it notes was actually invented in that time, and of course in this century Google has imitated them. They have Google 20%. And what I noticed, I think it was in your presentation, that bureaucracy takes 1 day a week of your time. What a waste of time and space. I think that time should be erased. Let's spend that time for innovate and take time out to think. And it's actually also one of the things I talk a lot about in my book, because we think if we sit and it doesn't look like we do something, if we're not busy, it doesn't really get accepted as something meaningful. But this is a very important trend, innovation, entrepreneurship, and if you are a company, in order to get the best people, you must give them license to innovate, and you also have to have a plan for that. It's not that people just sit and talk. It's very strict. Look to Google, look to 3M, but they do it very well. We also heard a little bit about the importance of green. I mean, obviously, I come from one of the happiest countries in the world, Denmark, the Nordic. I'm married to a Norwegian. I'm quarter Swedish, and I work a lot in Finland. We are very happy, or I don't know how happy we are, but we get on with things. And one of the things that we really excel in, I think 3.5% of the GDP in Denmark stems from green innovation. So take it from me, there is a lot of future in that. And the earlier you get started, we see also Germany is quite strong on that. The circular economy is something that we will not be able to ignore if we haven't got started. It is a vision to make the most out of your resources, and then you maximize the use of anything you do, so it lasts longer, and also that is a way to minimize waste. So made to last is another big keyword. That means that young people, youngest, the global citizen, they don't necessarily want to own a big car. If you live in London, it's mad to own a car. You have a zip car, a sharing car. How many of you have heard of Airbnb? Few? Did you try it? Very nice, I think. Did you have bad experiences? No, most people don't. I looked up in Linz, and in fact, I could have stayed here for 3 days for the same price that I pay for one small room down in Vienna, but it was something I thought about a little bit later, but it is a very disruptive innovation model. Airbnb claimed that they alone last year added over 630 million to New York's economy. No wonder that hotels are demonstrating against this. But you need to understand that disruptive innovation is here to stay. So you better come up with disruptive ideas, disrupt your own organization before somebody else does it. Last but not least, I think that when we speak about purpose and this idea of making a better world, diversity culture, being open and being open-minded and think diverse is also key to being, I would say, equipped for the future. Now, we're looking at, and I took this in particular because when I read the report, I thought, well, we are not going to be just 4 generations working there, we're going to be 5 generations. And that really requires that we think in a different way. We need empathic leadership because that's the only way to inspire innovation and collaboration, and it's also the only way that we can make the future happen. We have to tap into that change and, in a way, capitalize on it. 2 great examples, again, family business, Patagonia. You probably all know Patagonia here. Or do you buy local? You know the trekking gear? Yvon Chouinard, his company was actually named as the coolest company on the planet. And he says to people, don't consume, don't throw anything away, don't buy anything new. But people love him, so when they do buy something new, they go and buy from him. The whole food guy, John Mackay, started in 1979 in Texas. He's a very inspiring man. He worked with the community. He built together with them, and today he's a very powerful man, and he definitely has a 4P business model, and he speaks about conscious capitalism. But this is again about inclusive organization, and trust me when I say those guys are still learning, and that's what they say. If you look at another entrepreneur like Richard Branson, he says that his biggest passion is learning new things, and this is a big trend. How do you learn new things when you're 50 plus, 60 plus? Well, of course, you go to Coursera. Have anyone heard about Coursera? One person, two, three. Did you take a course? Was it a good experience? Comme ci, comme ça. Well, it's called massive open online courses. You can get a free MBA online nowadays. And you can make it your own, you can cherry pick it, and even companies now are starting to acknowledge online learning. So this is really a big disruptive idea. When I first talked about them in front of 350 deans from world's leading business school, there was only 3.5 million users. Now there are 10 million users, and they have over 100 universities collaborating with them, and it's a big one, Duke, etc., etc. Now, the last of the trends, and of course, as you can tell, trends are my passion. And they all work together, they're all interconnected, because once you get the first trends I've spoken about, once you get them, you start ticking the boxes, you are tapping into a much bigger ecosystem, because you start then to create what I call social capital. The World Bank describes social capital as the glue that keeps a society together. And this is really the softer values, those are the purpose. Did you know that IBM, the guys I spoke about that did the research about creativity, IBM actually award the people within the organization for meditating? I met people from IBM and said, I can't even function if I don't do my meditation. And this is something they've done since at least the last 4 years. But it's also what is taught at Harvard Business School. Positive psychology as a catalyst of change is also a very important thing, and this is what also informs tomorrow's leaders. They're looking for authenticity because we are redefining what it means to be successful. In fact, the sort of old definition of the good life is being reconfigured as I speak. Somebody call it better, and I like this idea that we have betterness, not necessarily more. And it's about economics of for humans. The guy who wrote this book, it was published on Harvard Business Review. He said, businesses need to get out of business into betterness. So that is a little bit a challenging thing, of course, but I suggest that we balance that. Now, this is my executive summary, a visual one of the future. I call it the A4 sheet of the future. It is connecting the dots, and it's a mindset diagram that really sums up everything that I've talked about this evening. And it's also really worth to notice that there in one A4 sheet you have the key drivers of change, the challenges, the trends, that if you don't buy into those trends, they might represent a threat for you. If you look to the rational touch point that we have to remind ourselves when we are in business, collaboration will be a key buzzword in the future, but also an actionable one that we need to tap into because it's really closely connected to innovation. We need to give people access, we need to be smart in our thinking, we need to give people the opportunity to work from home. We really need to rethink because technology optimizers and creative collaborators will be the lifeblood of tomorrow's economy. Then we've got the tree huggers, the global sustainers. And as a Copenhagen Goodwill Ambassador, I'm still quite shocked that on the third day of our conference, we have a clean tech workshop, and out of 80 ambassadors, very often there's only 20 there. People haven't woken up to that not only is it important, but it's also one that we can actually save a lot of money by being conscious about having a circular model installed in our business. Smaller businesses are much better, I would say, placed to tap into this trend than bigger businesses are. And last but not least, I think engagement is a very important thing, because if you don't care, why should anyone care about you? So to conclude, I would say that it is liberating to remind ourselves that we all can be active change makers. You can be the change you want to see. And once you start working on that, becoming part of that journey, what happens is that you become much better leader, you inspire people around you, you have perhaps much less, lesser stress in your everyday, because you've actually realized that it's really, really valuable to take time out to think about the future. And in that time, the biggest job you have is to understand how you can create concepts and propositions that actually include the 4 Ps I've talked about. How can I install that mindset throughout my organization? You can't do everything in one time. Somebody told me that it's like a big elephant. You cannot eat it in one bite. You have to take it in bite sizes. So that's my advice to the future. But key to success in the future is to think different and also to be more creative. And if you're interested to know more about the thinking, of course, my book, unfortunately we couldn't get a bookseller here, but should you be interested here in this, there is a code where you can get it at a 30% discount. Come and talk to me afterwards otherwise. And I guess that's all I have to say. So happy future mapping. Thank you.
So, Dankeschön, Frau Kjaer, für diesen Ausflug in die Zukunft. Und ja, ich darf mich im Namen der Veranstalter bei Ihnen bedanken, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, nämlich für Ihr großes Interesse. Darf Sie darauf hinweisen, dass wenn Sie mehr über die KMU, über die KMU-Strategie wissen möchten, wenn Sie sie noch ganz genau studieren möchten, dass Sie das sehr gerne auch downloaden können, nämlich von der Website von Academia Superior. Und ich darf Ihnen jetzt am Schluss, Ihnen als Unternehmerinnen, als Unternehmer, noch einen Gedanken mitgeben, den der Herr Wirtschaftskammerpräsident Dr. Leitl ganz gern zitiert und auch sagt. Der da lautet, er sagt immer, Unternehmer arbeiten deutlich länger und arbeiten deutlich mehr. Sie sind weniger oft im Krankenstand, sie sind kürzer auf Urlaub. Dafür oder gerade deshalb leben sie 2 Jahre länger. In diesem Sinn, alles Gute, Wiederschauen.